is the focal points also. They refer the questionnaire or the survey to colleagues that were working on this topic in, for example, in the ports or in other services. But never mind. This presentation it was also prepared in collaboration with my colleague Caroline Paquier, who works in the it's a department that we have in the headquarters. It's data integration department, and within the data integration department we have the observatory project. Then she's the observatory senior program manager of this department, and they are the ones that are developing this study with the support of the standards department. Okay, some introductory words about the observatory. Then the observatory project born in 2018 after a resolution adopted by the Assembly of Delegates that mentioned that the WOAH at that time to develop an observatory to monitor the implementation of the international standard, to increase transparency and to identify constraints and difficulties faced by members. Then the idea is to, we have been quite insisting on your participation in the standard setting process of the adopted standards. But it's also important to know, and we had a kind of good and nice information regarding the activities in your own country, because we need to know how these standards are implemented after they are adopted, because probably we need to modify the way that we are developing our standard. Then they need to be developed in a fit-for-purpose way. Then the observatory has objectives and a process. Then the idea is to gather data and insights regarding the implementation. Remember also we did through the Animal Welfare Forum, a first meeting of the forum was on the implementation. And the idea was also to know the challenges, the difficulties and opportunity for implementing this the animal welfare standards. But the idea of the observatory is to try to have a general approach on this, because they are not only projects on welfare, there's others like, for example, how members are implemented compartmentalization. And this is quite in line of what we heard from our colleague from IU-IBAR regarding the data that we need to collect regarding the implementation. Also identify areas where the implementation of the standards falls short and provide the recommendation and also call for action, and disseminate information while preserving the confidentiality. That is a quite important aspect. The idea is not to publicly disseminate information regarding the implementation of the standards. Then the overall arching goal is to improve the effectiveness and the use of the WOAH standards. There are two main pillars here. There is a monitoring report that it's using the existing data in a wide range of standards that are included in this report. For example, the idea is to use the data of the PVS, some data coming from FAO, etc. And it's a high-level assessment of the level of implementation. And the main delivery is a report that will be published every 5 years. In the other side, we have the thematic study, which is the one that we are conducting for transport. Then it's new, and ad hoc data is collected. Then, because of that, we conduct a survey. A smaller set of standards on a specific topic are part of this kind of study. And the idea is to know the barriers and the success factors to the implementation of these standards we want to assess. And the deliverables is a published report at least once a year. Then going to the detail in case of the thematic study on animal welfare, then Julia already mentioned, this is a quite controversial and sensitive topic, specifically in some member from WOAH, because we see that there have been some difficulties on transport, especially by land and sea, and we wanted to know the level of implementation and the challenges that our members are facing. Then transport of live animals is a complex issue with a potential impact on animal welfare. We are going to hear more about how we are reviewing the transport chapters for WOAH. Then in the context of the global animal welfare strategy, we started the planning, or we started the revision of the standards, and we are trying to gain insights on the current state of play that could also help the other group that is reviewing the standard, but also the Code Commission in their discussions. The idea is to assess to what extent the standards related to transport are implemented in WOAH members. 6 for feedback on members and overall experience with these standards, and what are the factors that could facilitate the implementation versus the barriers to prevent the implementation. Then also to inform as I said, the standard revision process that the Code Commission is conducting, and the other group that Maria, it's the chairwoman, is also conducting. What are the methods that we are using? A survey. Because of that, I was asking if some of the participants here already received that survey that was targeting the veterinary services to assess the level of implementation of the WOAH standards on transport. And in the next step, because the process is still ongoing, the thing is that we are having problems with the staff, and then the observatory project is waiting for a new staff to take the second phase, which will be more focused interviews on the situation on transport in some specific countries. Then the scope is transport by land and sea only. The species are covered by the current chapter 7.2 and 3, cattle, small ruminants, pigs, poultry, buffaloes, and camelids. It's in a global study, and the time frame is what happened currently in their countries. What was the approach for the data collection? Animal welfare during transport sea, and the level of implementation and the challenge that we're facing. As I said, the survey was sent last year. It was an online questionnaire in the 3 languages. You were the target responded. Because of that, I'm sitting. If any from the room already respond the survey? Last opportunity, none? You. Then good, 1. Then what were the topics that the survey covered? The importance of animal transport in the country or from the country, and the transport by sea and land, the presence of a specific regulatory framework, the presence of a mechanism of enforcement, and general information about these 2 means of transport. In terms of response rate, I will focus in this region. 21 member countries responded at 40% of the region, not super response rate, but that is what we are working on in terms of the overall results. 52% of WOAH members responded the questionnaire and completed. Some of the preliminary results was the level of prioritization on this topic. For the competent authority was 60% was a high priority. That's also interesting because gives an idea also that, for example, there was from the countries that complete the survey, 78% responded that there was some kind of regulatory framework covering animals during transport by land, and 78 by land, and 70% by sea, which is not bad. When we ask what were the main requirements that not are included in the regulatory framework that inform that they have, the journey plan was something that was mentioned, 92%, 94%, which is it's important. A checklist for actions following to follow some aspects, 34% by land, 44% say that they don't have it. A contingency plan, 57% mentioned that was not included, and 67% by sea. Then it's something that we are working in with the other group. Also at the headquarters, we are also developing with the collaborations with some collaborating centers, some guidance documents, and those are going to be, and it's a discussion that we need to have with the Code Commission, to include as an annex to the chapter a model of contingency plan and also a model of checklist for transport of animals. Also, in terms of the mechanism to enforce the regulatory framework, the 72% mentioned that there was something in place for land and 74% for sea. And in terms of the inspection, 6% mentioned that there was no control point for land, and 15% for sea transport. Then it's not super problematic, but it is something that need to be reinforced. What are the next steps for the thematic study? Explore the barriers to uptake of animal welfare standards during transport, as well as success factors with the veterinary service of WOAH members. And for that, initially we were thinking in focus group, but we are more inclined to do some interviews with different members. Then we are defining different categories of members in each of the WOAH regions. Then probably some of you are going to be contacted during this semester to participate in a more in-depth interview with the colleagues of the observatory project to finalize this thematic study. And 72% of the respondents agree to share their experience. Then we hope that when we are going to contact you, you are going to say, yes, for sure, we are super motivated, and we want to participate in the follow-up of this project. That's all from my side. Thank you very much, and I would like also to acknowledge my colleague Caroline Paquier, who helped me to prepare this presentation.
Thank you, Leopoldo. And I think since we are ahead of time, we have time for
you see?
2 quick questions. If there are any questions from your side. Yes.
Here you have a mic.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking about the transportation, and you were talking about, I don't know whether WOAH has an standard of transporting animals, or do they have stocking capacity for a particular vehicle for carrying animals? Because we've noticed that Sometimes in the process of transporting somebody, animals, some of them die on the highway while they are going. And what are the distance? And if you carrying them, what are the things you need to have in place before transporting them as well? Thank you.
Well, so far, currently in the chapters, there's no defined duration, and also there's some indication on the space allowance, but it's something that we are definitely going to work with the other group that is reviewing the chapter, because it's a specific point that is always I would say controversial in terms of the definition, for example, of the space allowance, because it needs also to play with the climatic conditions, also to the length of the trip or the journey, etc. But it's something that for sure the other group is considering, and probably Maria is going to also mention it more in deep in the next presentation. But it is something that is, even in the revision that the European Union is doing on the regulation of transport, that is one of the points that have been quite discussed, because there is a nice formula to calculate the necessary space for animals depending on the conditions of transport.
Thank you for this very informative presentation, Leopold. Back to our senior from Malawi, he was saying that with the issue with this transportation, I think it happened to some of us as well. Some people, they don't care, or they don't have this compassion that the animals are feeling pain, as they are thinking they will slaughter them later. So I was thinking, as this humane education as a solution to try to educate the young generation, and I was asking if at WOAH you have planned to include this in those materials. Thank you.
You are completely right. The educational component is crucial. Unfortunately, we need to use our resources in a more practical way. We haven't think to have a specific program of educate the population. Even we have some good examples, and for example, when we talk about the dog population management, we develop in Europe a specific program for school children on responsible ownership. Then it's something that also at regional level, because as you mentioned, each region has their own specificity, can be also developed, but always funds need to be found, and also the resources need to be also be there to develop this kind of material. But I fully agree that it's something necessary to try to educate as soon as possible the public in terms of let them know that animals are sentient beings and are suffering, but also there is a possibility to work with them and also to rear them and in good conditions.
Thank you, Leopoldo, and thank you for your questions. We come to Maria. Maria is chairing the ad hoc group at WOAH, working on the revision of the transport chapters, and she will give us insight about the work of her group.
change like this. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a big pleasure to be with all of you here in this training session and to have the opportunity also to come to Kenya. I want to thank WOAH for the invitation to be here. To tell you before starting that I'm also an animal welfare focal point in Portugal, so I will try to share also with you some of my experience. But the main point here today is to talk about this work of the ad hoc group on the revision of the animal transport chapters. I have to say that what I'm going to present here are just proposals, because in fact, as Leopoldo told you, next week is going to be a meeting of the Code Commission. So some of the things might change, but this is what it is today. And you have a bit the feeling of what we are doing and how this work is going. So I will talk a bit about the codes and make a brief introduction, and then about the work that is in progress on the revision of the transport codes. No doubt, the animals are important for different purposes, and it's not only food, clothing, but also for recreation and companionship, and our relationship also with the animals is changing. But when we talk about transport of animals, this is quite a complex issue, and not very easy, complex, challenging. And it has an impact on animal welfare, and in some countries, it depends on the countries, it raises also society concerns. And one of the important things we have here on transport is that we have to deal with so many stakeholders. And an important also thing is the responsibilities, because it's in fact is a shared responsibility. So this is just a brief overview of the different impacts of animal transport, and no doubt that it has on animal welfare, on animal health, and here the questions of animal health are very important, but also the use of the medication, an important issue too, food safety, trade, economic impact, production, and I was listening to your very nice presentations and what you are doing. And for example, this case you showed about the market of the broilers and how you transport these animals. It has a huge impact on these animals. So someone yesterday told that we have to bring these things and make the people aware of the impacts on the transport and try to change the things. Sorry, I went a bit further. I pick up just a case on animal transport and trade, and of course we are talking also about these international codes, and trade is an important and an opportunity. But if we look at transport, and this is some pictures of our operations in Portugal when we do these livestock vessel exports, we feel that these are so complex operations that involve so many different people, different stakeholders, the need of a very good planning, contingency, and an important issue that is a communication between competent authorities. So in fact, what we are doing here, what you are doing here, and we also do it at different regions, is to get this network, because the things to work out well, and Leopoldo will talk in his 6th presentation, I think, about this whole journey scenario, the next one, is to make this kind of network to solve problems, specific situations, and of course each region has its own reality, but to solve these problems, these complex operations that involve the transport of animals. And then going to the transport chapters, we have three chapters, the sea, the land, and the air chapter. And in my view, and I'm also, as I said, a focal point, this is really an important documents, because they are based on science knowledge, so it's an important point to start. They set these minimum requirements, and of course they have general principles, but they also have specificities for different types of transport. They cover all the phases of transport, and the transport doesn't start when the animal is loaded in the truck. It starts much before. The responsibility is once again very much the focus on the different responsibilities of the stakeholders. Each one needs to know it's their role, what they have to do in this process. And an important issue that you take in consideration the different realities worldwide. And when we talk about transport, of course, the geographical situation is important, the climatic is also important, the type of production, so we have to look to all of these. But this is the basis for the countries to take actions, to make the enforcement, and different tools can be on place to do it. And, of course, it's important for international trade, but it's also the basis for networking and for sharing communication, sharing good practice. And in the end, this is a process. It takes time to improve, but this is really what we want, a gradual improvement of the animal welfare. So, going to the codes, this is our very nice group, the ad hoc group, and I think Leopoldo agrees, it's a very nice group with lots of discussions. I will present you to you. It's me, that I have the pleasure to share it. Laura Lapid's from Uruguay, Jennifer Hoods from Canada, Hayden Cahill from Ireland, Nikki Kells from New Zealand, Johannes Schupala from Namibia, and Stanislav Rachel from the European Commission. So we had the last meeting in June in Paris, and what is interesting in this group is to have so many different expertise and different realities. So we have, as you can imagine, nice discussion, difficult ones, but we are progressing and making this work and bringing all these different realities and expertises. And as I said, please, this is a work in progress. These are just proposals that I'm going to show you now, the work until now. But, of course, the Code Commission has to tell us after the meeting next week if we go in the right direction. But then the members of WOAH have a very important role, so we are expecting your contribution to our proposals and to be changing the things and improving the work. So, why to revise these animal transport codes? There was this Code Commission meeting in 2020, and after this meeting, it was found that there was some significant duplication of the animal transport codes. You all read the codes, and you said, well, maybe some things are repeated in the codes, so why not revising it and having, and our proposal, as I said, is to have just one code, and to include the road, the water, and the air. And of course, air, we have to take in consideration the IATA rules. And we put water here because we were discussing this, and in fact, it's not only sea, because some animals are transported by river or by lakes. So sometimes we think so much about the sea, but there is much more than that. Then the idea is to update with the latest scientific and technical information, so is what we are doing. This was already a lot talked about the animal-based measures. So we are going to include these animal-based measures, and whenever it's necessary, the resource and management-based measures. The idea is to harmonize with other chapters. So we took in consideration the last one, the chapter on animal welfare during transport, the slaughter, sorry. And of course, to highlight the responsibilities and competencies, but also to look to the whole transport. You want to do the code to be easy to be read, sorry, and to have the different phases of the transport. And here you can see a more complex transports, but of course are more simple ones. In a transport that involves sea and road transport, the complexity increases, but and of course we have to take all the steps. And then to talk about all these points. Until now we have discussed a bit the scope, and this is what it is today in the codes. And our idea is to focus on commercial activity, transport in context of commercial activity, domesticated species, although, of course, when we talk, it can also be applied to, in general, to other species, because, of course, if we talk about wild and captive wild animals, they might need different conditions, and there is some indication to CITES. Then we are looking at definitions, and we found the need to revise some definitions. I didn't put all the definitions we worked in, but also to include new ones. For example, transporter, there was not a definition of transporter in the chapters. And so this is our proposal, for example, for transporter, but also to bring the figure of a new figure on the codes, that is the journey organizer. That in fact is the person that plans and organizes all the journey. And here I try to summarize a bit some of the roles of this journey organizer. And about of the planning, and the planning is very important. It can also be the person that contracts the transporter, but it can also be the transporter in itself, but in fact it's who organizes. And one important issue is the person in contact with the competent authority, because in fact everything goes okay if nothing goes wrong, but if something goes wrong, it's really problematic. And can be also the person in charge of the loading operations and the contingencies. They have to have a contingency plan. Another issue is to define the hazards, and this is a bit what Leopold already told. Try to identify the hazards, how to assess them, and then the actions, the recommendations. And here are some examples of hazards, and we are following, as I said, the animal welfare during slaughter chapter. Animal welfare-based measures, and we have here some of very common ones in, when we talk about animal transport. So they prefer these animal-based measures to other type of measures, but what we have to do is to find the measures, think about thresholds, because in fact we have to measure, try to see which can be these thresholds based on science, and of course it has to be some flexibility and adaptation to the specificities of the transport. How can the competent authority collect and where? At the farm, at slaughter, at the market, and which actions to adopt. Another issue is the training and competence of personnel, and we have been talking a lot about building capacity, training, and we think this is quite an important issue and a key aspect of good welfare. In fact, you can have the best means of transport, but if people are not okay, it's a disaster. And so they don't know what to do. So training is really an important issue. And the discussion and the revision of the chapters is to think about formal training that should be recognized by the competent authority, a discussion about the validity of the training, and which subjects should be covered. And we can discuss it more if you want, but this is one of the important issues. Then define the responsibilities. Oh, they were already in the chapter, so this is quite a revision. And in fact, each person should be aware of their own responsibilities. And I just pointed here some of the people involved, the stakeholders that we need to define these responsibilities, and the work is, we have already some proposals, and the work is in progress. Contingency, another issue. So in fact, what we want to work in at this stage, these contingency plans, they should be in place for every journey, cover the journey. Of course, this is quite much more important for very most complex journeys. And in fact, what who develops this contingency plan should think what can go wrong, what actions should be taken, and who to contact. And here is also an important point, because sometimes things go really wrong and the organizers or the transporters forgot to really contact the right person so the solutions can come. Planning of the journey, another point of this revision. I don't go over all these points, of course, but in fact, documentation, type of documentation, preparation of the animals, vehicles, so on, environmental conditions, all these should be sought before the journey. And here, documentation plays an important role, and especially when we are talking, well, every time, but especially when we are talking about international transport and these veterinary health certificates. The fact that this documentation is not okay can have a critical impact on animal welfare, and animals should only be loaded when all the documentation is completed. So this is some examples of the documentation that we are working on, like the veterinary certification, the journey log, all these, the documentation of the animals and so on, that we are proposing for the revision of the codes. And to finish, so this is the approach, this is where we are. We already have written some recommendations, but now we have to organize a bit of work. So the idea now to go forward is to describe the main welfare hazards, identify the animal-based measures, provide recommendations, and of course can be some species-specific recommendations and for the different means of transport. So it's our work, future work. And all these points are going to be covered there. And space allowance is one of the points, and it's not an easy one, but this is going to be under discussion. Handling, fitness for transport, loading and unloading, so all these points to be worked on. And as Leopoldo told, our proposal is to include the reference on the codes to this emergency plan model that is being developed, and the model of the journey plan, and also a checklist model, so to include this, to make reference to this, all this documentation that we think is quite important documentation and very helpful for the transport of animals. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. I hope I was on time.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this very interesting introduction about the work of the ad hoc group. Thanks a lot. Any questions to Maria?
Okay.
So, you're closer, we start with you then.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the presentation. When you look at the code itself, which is under revision, and you look at the responsibilities in number 7, the responsibilities of veterinarians are not very clear.
Okay.
Because they actually made them individuals, including veterinarians. But the responsibilities of a vet should be very clear in this code. So when you are making revisions, please consider that. Thank you.
Can I reply or reply that? Okay. Thank you. So this is the kind of feedback we are waiting from your side regarding this. And I was wondering, you are talking about private vets or official vets?
The code itself is talking about, it is actually including them in all individuals.
Okay.
So we need to be very clear and say, what is the responsibility of a private vet and what is the responsibility of a public one.
Okay.
But they can be the same, but so long as the work of a veterinarian is made clear in the code.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah. Ghana first.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to support what my other colleagues said, for these ones are public good, and public good it should be stated as a state vet, unless the CVO delegates a private. Then I just want to add up. I also was discussing with other presentation. WOAH normally write government authority. If my veterinarian asks you when is it at multi-secretarial, where is the document stating? When is state government authority agency, and another body like Food and Drug Authority can say, it means I can also do the same. And that will also hamper the work of the chief veterinary officer in reporting and all those things, because they also have interest. So please, WOAH should take note of this authority status in various documents. Thank you.
Okay. I think Leo wants to say something.
Thanks. Just to intervene very shortly, when in the current chapter, when we refer veterinarians, are mainly private veterinarians that are in charge, for example, in the resampling points, in the farms that are the ones that are supporting the handlers, or even also in contact with the competent authority, because in the current one we talk about the competent authority, and that is important that the group will be using the current definitions for competent authority, veterinary services, which is completely different, and we already have a lot of discussion when the readers of the code see veterinary services. I think that is the competent authority, which is not, because the veterinary services is all the people involved, that it could be private, public, veterinarians, and that's important to stick to the definitions that are also just modified regarding those competent authority, veterinary services, and veterinary authority. But the other group will be quite clear on which one is responsible for what, because in the transport activity, normally there is a lot of difficulties when responsibility it's need to be assigned to someone. Thanks.
Thanks. So last question from Gambia. Later we have a lot of time for discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam, for the brilliant presentation. It's just, I want to raise concern again. The standards that you put forward, definitely, they are international-based standards. But when it comes to most of our African countries, we have seen the presentations from some of the countries when it comes to the transport of these animals from the local, from the producer level, coming down to the market. That's where the concern is. The concern is not like, if you are to make export, because there we know we're going to meet the standards. The export team, they will provide the needed transport whatsoever. But at the local level, that's where the problem is, and that's where we are concerned with the animal welfare issues. So we are seeing, because the capacity is not there with our governments. However, you see, they are saying they don't have the financial muscles to push some of these things. So these are our concerns. What can we come together to see with the support of other entities to ensure that the standards are met? If not, we'll put all the codes, all the standards, but in Africa, we'll not be able to implement and meet those standards. It will be very difficult. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Of course, these are standards made for worldwide. So the challenge is to have all these different realities and from all these countries. But of course, when we are talking about the trade, it's higher standards. But there are lots of things in the codes and lots of general principles and things that you can take on, even for local transport. So maybe you cannot, from one day to another, or it takes years to get there. But I think there are lots of things written there that are important and should be taken from that point for making simple things. I was thinking about the project that was present about the cages. This is a simple project. It's a thing that goes step by step. Maybe you will not ask for a very nice truck from one day to another, but small steps. And the codes gives this basis.
Let me give you an example. For example, in the Gambia, it's more of Muslim country. Huh? during during Islamic festive, like Tobaski, you know, Muslims, they slaughter rams for Tobaski. So like if in the Gambia we don't have enough ram, we have to export from Senegal, from Mali, you understand? So these vendors, they use big trucks, and then this like they just put everything, all the animals together like that. Before they even arrive, you see many of the animals dying or even wasting, you know. So those are all issues that we need to deal with, absolutely.
But you see an impact. And maybe people, if they start to think about impact of putting, one day they put one less, and maybe the question is to make this work to show the impact of that. Yeah.
So thank you so much. And if I may add to this, is just that I think the first step is that you mention it and you express it here, and there's a forum to discuss it. I think this is the very first step for improvement. And yes, as Maria said, the code is there to embrace all the transport, not only the big companies. And we come back to Leopoldo. And he will talk about the whole scenario workshop on long-distance transport.
Okay, hello once again. I will show you a project, or it's not a project, it's an initiative that started in the European platform on animal welfare, the WOAH Animal Welfare European Platform, with the idea to put together both extremes of the chain. That means the countries that are importing and the countries that are exporting, and the transport that is involved in also in both ends, because we have been seeing, and that's also is my experience, the knowledge of the other person that is in the other side of the trip, of the journey. It's crucial when you need to find some kind of solution to a crisis. Then if, for example, there is a problem on the certification and animals are rejected on the arrival, if you have the contact point, if you already met that person in a meeting, it could facilitate a lot the possibilities to solve the problem. And I have been involved in a lot of that kind of crisis that not necessarily are related to the welfare condition of the animals during the transport, but for example, as I mentioned, wrong certification, problems with the vessels. I had an experience with a vessel from Brazil that have some problems, mechanical problems, then started the journey 3 days after the planned departure. Then when arrived to the destination, the certification was not longer valid, even if the animals were tested for all the diseases that were included in the certification. That kind of things can be solved with a more fluent communication between partners and contact points. Then this is, as I said, this is an initiative that started in Europe with countries from the western part of Europe to the eastern part, but now we are replicating this experience with the countries already from the Middle East, North Africa, and we are expecting to do one of this workshop in South America, also inviting European and Northern African and Middle East countries to participate. I also acknowledge the support of Dr. Thomas Rudnick from the sub-regional representation in Brussels, who also is the one that is developing this concept. Then the idea is to help countries to improve animal welfare during long-distance transport and cross-border transport in compliance with WOAH standards for the whole duration of the journey along some specific routes. That's mean by land. In Europe, there's a lot of international transport from, for example, Germany to some countries in the eastern part of Europe, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, etc. Then it's focused on the responsibility of the competent authority over the whole journey. The idea, it is not specifically written, and it's something that need to be also addressed, because it's not easy. There is and this is a word that I always struggle to say it, the extraterritoriality of the law is something that here is important, because you cannot apply your own rules. For example, in Chile, we don't apply the same rules in Argentina because it's not our country, it's not our law. But then we need to rely in this chain of relation of competent authority and the respect also of those competent authority of those countries of the chapters of the code that they are adopting every May. Then it's an opportunity also to share best practice and strengthen collaboration between competent authority and other authorities, for example, custom officers. In some of these workshops, we have been invited the colleagues from the customs, and maybe in your countries there are other authorities that are involved also in this. When we're talking about international transport, they are involved in this. Then, as I mentioned, there have been regional workshops. There was a pilot one in 2021 in Poland, and also there was a whole scenario in Jordan. But also, I mentioned these multi-regional workshops, for example, in 2021 by teleconference that put together countries of Europe and Middle East. More recently, the one in Cairo, Egypt, where I think Maria participated, and also I was invited to also to participate in the last year in Tunisia, where countries from Europe, Middle East, and Northern Africa participate and share their experience on long-distance transport. Then I will say some more specific words about the last one that was developed in Tunisia. Then the agenda included the WOAH and WOAH mandate on animal welfare, the global animal welfare strategy, and an update of the activities. That is also include what I just presented before, the observatory thematic study. There was information about the content of the chapter, which at that time we were just starting to review. We received some country reports about the state of play of the legislation, something that we have been doing here in terms of the competent authority, the border post, the main species and livestock trade, legislation, implementation of standards, and what are the main challenges, more or less what is included in the thematic study. We also invited countries that have a specific legislation, like the Australian standard for export of livestock and exported supply chain assurance scheme, which if you don't know, for exporting live animals in Australia, you need to be ensured that the conditions in the destinations are met, that also include sometimes the slaughter of the animals. We had the NGO perspective included, and the Remesa Scientific and Technical Office was participating there, and the School of Veterinary Medicine in Tunis, and there was case working groups with some case study, and more or less we are going to do that after this at the end of this session, try to discuss in groups about this important topic. And there was also a session on slaughter of animals. What were the main points discussed? The multi-regional whole journey scenario are useful and instrumental to improve multi-regional collaboration and collaboration between competent authorities. I come back to the importance of the face of the people that are sometimes you are calling by phone for trying to solve a problem. The need of strength of communication, once again, and collaboration between competent authorities. The idea is to always think that the animals are the main goal to protect them. The importance of the defining responsibility, that we already discussed it with the presentation of Maria. There is always some people that have a responsibility trying to escape and not take the responsibility that corresponds. That is important to be clearly defined. The importance of an appropriate journey planning and preparation before animals departed. Maria mentioned that we are going to try to provide members with some models that they can use to prepare that planning. The importance of emergency procedure. Once again, I think that it's not necessary under the capacities of all the veterinary service to prepare those emergency plans or contingency plans, and we are going to try to provide members with a model of that. And the need of further develop procedures in the event of a refusal to allow the completion of the journey. Probably you know, in the code there is, in the chapters, there is some steps that are recommended when a journey cannot be completed. That means that the consignment is rejected. But also remember that the WOAH have a specific mediation procedure that can be used when there is a conflict between two members. That process need to be agreed between both countries. It's something that it's a must that both countries are in agreement to apply the mediation process, and that mediation process, it could be on animal welfare, but also in other areas that the organizations work, like certification, sanitary requirements, etc. But there is a tool there that really it's not really well known and also not used very frequently. What are the challenges that we find in those workshops? The lack of awareness of importers, drivers, workers, and handlers and authorities about the animal welfare during transport. Many authorities involved with overlapping tasks and responsibility. I was mentioned custom authority sometimes, or could be others, that and they have the same task and responsibilities, and then when the problem is there, it's difficult to assign a specific responsibility to someone. Weak infrastructure for animal transport, quarantine, loading station, rest house, harbor, etc. That is not easy to solve because it's more related to the country policy or structure, but it's something that need to be addressed. Also the inability to accommodate large number of animals, especially in some seasons, such as the pilgrimage season and Ramadan. That is, it was mentioned already in terms of how manage in some specific period of the year a lot of animals that need to be transported. Security problems in some countries. That was discussed in this in this workshop, a specific workshop. I'm sure that in other regions, like for example, we have a case in the Americas, a consignment was stopped in Canarias, and they found that in the vessel there was drugs smuggled in the vessel. Then the vessel was stopped, deviate to another destination, and then which are the more affected? The animals, because the feed was starting to be less feed, less water. Then there is a need of communication, in this case from the country that the vessel started the journey to the origin, or even the country that stopped the vessel for a control that was a quite random control. Then there was some discussion and about some ideas to give response to those challenges, and maybe also we are going to have some from your side after in the breakout groups. Revise the legislation in line with the animal welfare standard during transport and import, defining the competencies with following awareness and training programs, coordinating between all parties and defining responsibility, regulation, instruction, manuals, what we are talking about, to provide some guidance on how to develop this contingency plan or journey plan. It's logical that you need to have the contact points of someone in the destination, etc. Raise the efficiency of the infrastructure through the collaboration of the company with the relevant authorities. And then it's not up to the company that is organizing the transport to do whatever they want to load the animals, for example. And risk analysis, then addressing the gaps between the two countries that are involved, for example, in transport. That's more or less what has been discussed. As I said, we are putting a lot of effort in this kind of workshop because we have seen that it's easier to solve any problem, crisis related to transport when people know each other, or at least know the telephone number of the one that they need to contact in case of a problem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Leopoldo. I think we only have a few minutes to go to start with the working groups. So is there any question? No? So I think Bas will explain us how we split into the working groups.
Since I have the microphone, and on the topic of the three presentations that we discussed just now, and this is actually more for the information of the facilitators than for you in the room, I think. In terms of standard setting, there is this particularity in Africa that is called the common position, and that is also applied by the European Union or by the European region. And I'm not sure many of the new focal points are aware of this process. But just to say that it is unlikely that your delegate will send comments directly to WOAH. What is more likely to happen is that the African Union will convene meetings with the delegates from Africa to come to a common position, a common opinion on how to respond, amend, reject, or approve a draft piece of standard, such as the one on transport. Okay, so WOAH in itself is not involved in this process. This is a process handled by the member states. But just so you know that this is a bit different than in other regions. Right. With all the inspiration that you have gained now, we give you about an hour in 4 groups to discuss the issues surrounding transport. Each of the facilitators of this group is at liberty to introduce the topic the way they see fit and to try to generate a discussion. So what we'll do is we'll have 2 groups remaining in this room. Let me see whether the slides are moving without applying magic. Okay, so we will have Leopoldo and Maria facilitating 2 groups. See, this is already going too fast. Maybe it's the automatic timer. 2 groups. Let me stop the main screen because that is probably what is blocking me. Sorry about that. Okay. Leopoldo and Maria will facilitate 2 groups in this hall. First group, no, it's still moving, the slides. First group, facilitated by Leopoldo, will include Angola, Gambia, Kenya, Alan, but I don't think he is here, Liberia, Namibia, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania. Did you get all this? Let me try and stop this. I don't think we need to share this for people online anyway, so but now it's not sharing. Great. Yeah, so I will have to, unfortunately, go back and forth. And now nothing is working. Okay. So the second group will be facilitated by Maria and will include Botswana, Ghana, Marianne from Kenya, who is here, Malawi, Nigeria, Somalia, and Zambia. Okay? Now it's not moving on my side. I've got two presentations going on in parallel now. It's crazy. Okay, we're going to reconvene. After discussing with the facilitators of the 4 groups, we think it's better to reconvene as one group instead of going back in 2 different groups, mixing the people. It's probably best that we have a feedback session now with the 4 groups presenting to the other groups, and then we can have a discussion on anything else that came out of those group discussions. So, let me maybe start with Julia's group. Is that okay? Is it Beryl who is going to report back? Oh, okay. Welcome, Beryl.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be back after our discussion and break, and I hope you're all rejuvenated. Yeah. So, Group D, we had an amazing time with Yulia as our facilitator or our group leader, basically. And she started with icebreakers, where she showed us different modes of transportation for animals. And we had green, red, and orange cards. So if it is something that was not adequate or up to par, we were to show our red cards. If it was something that was still to debate about, we put up our orange cards. And if it was something good to go, we would put on our green cards. So we ended up discussing. We saw some appalling situations where animals were, being mishandled during transportation, and we were able to discuss that and hear everybody's point of view. So then she took around a document. She gave us copies of a transport document that was used to transport animals from Germany within a ship vessel. It took 11 days to transport them. And then once they were going to Eritrea. Once they got there, they were put on a truck to travel to the farm. And so basically we discussed what was needed to be checked when looking at the welfare of these animals. And so people put across their points. And the first one was people saw that it was necessary to look at the documents. The animals should have come with documentation, and this should be original movement permits and with veterinarian signatures and stamps to be able to show that this transportation was valid. Then next, the other thing to check for was to be clinical symptoms on the animal, to check the health status of the animal, to make sure that they are healthy, their gait was okay, their health was fine, they were alert, and they were in good condition. That is something that probably should have been checked off by a competent authority from the other end. And then when received on this other end, they should be in the same state. And if anything went astray in the middle, that should be noted. Then there should be animal identification as well. So all the animals that left the other end should be received on this end. We also saw that we need environmental check the environment that the animals were in when they arrived. For example, the ship vessel, once it docks, or even the truck, once it gets to the farm, we need to look at the ventilation within the vessel, the beddings. There should be enough beddings, they should be dry, they should be clean, there should be feeders and drinkers with fresh feed and drink. And the vessel, we also to check the cleanliness of the vessel. Stocking density was also meant to be checked. the quality of the transport basically should have been checked, as well as the quality of the transporter's skills, if it was the driver or the ship captain, as well as the attendant for the animals. Their skills should be at par and should be noted. Then also we should make note that there were resting pots within the transit, because it was 11 days of transit. Therefore, probably stops should be made to make sure that the animals are well rested and not under stressful conditions. Then we also saw that competent authorities are needed at, for example, if the animals are being transported on land, competent authorities within different points are required. For example, trained police. And these police should basically be trained to look at the animal welfare, as well as to check the documents that the animals are being transported with. In this case, the transport permits. Someone suggested there should also be welfare cards to make sure that the trained police are able to see the condition of the animals from when they were checked off from the farm to where they were going, that everything matches according to the cards. Then it was recommended that the transport drivers, the attendants on transit, and the competent authority, so this I'm repeating myself, need to be trained on animal welfare issues, and also authority given to be able to, arrest if these are not being followed, the animal welfare codes are not being followed. Then it was noted that police can be empowered to help to check on the provided checklists for the animals. So again, we are repeating, we need to empower the police. In Kenya, we have the transport regulations whereby it has been suggested to identify animal welfare officers who can be able to implement some of these regulations and even have the authority to make arrests. And that is something that's going into parliament to be debated. Then it was also suggested to involve other stakeholders to help animal welfare during transit. So I've already mentioned the police, the transport people, as well as people in the marketplaces. Once the animals arrive, there are people who should be trained on animal welfare to be able to take note of that. Then there were some challenges that were mentioned. In most countries, the vets don't have authority to stop the animal trucks to check them. Again, we need help, the vets need help from the police to be able to stop those trucks for checking. Again, it's important to involve different stakeholders. It was also recommended, that actually it was noted that identifying these animal welfare officers, as it's being done in Kenya, or it's been proposed to be done in Kenya, and it's already being practiced in Sweden, may not work for all African countries. So it needs to be conformed to the context of the countries, and that's something to look at. Then it was also brought up that in Kenya we have a system called LITS, Livestock Identification and Traceability System, which is a chip that's put on the animal to be able to trace it as it's moving around. And it was suggested that this would be good to combine it with the movement permits. Again, suggestions came up that this may not work for all African countries, and so we need to think about that. It was mentioned in Ethiopia that, and this also happens in other African countries, that another form of transportation is trekking, walking with the animal. I think we called it transhuman transport methods. And the thing is, the animals have to be stopped at different points of rest and fed as well as watered. However, the cost of this is too high and something needs to be done about it. So it was suggested if WOAH could have terrestrial transport codes for the transhuman methods, where animals that are being trekked have their animal welfare needs being taken care of, especially for long distances. But then again, it was suggested maybe we should not focus much on this, but it's food for thought. Then it was also we also talked about certain practices that are currently in place in African countries that do not promote animal welfare. For example, large sticks being put on necks of aggressive animals during transportation. So this makes them, calm down. However, it's really heavy on them, but it's to control their aggressive state. And then also muzzles are put on the mouth of the young animals so that not to suckle their mothers. Again, animal welfare needs to be checked here, but it's currently being practiced. It was also recommended that we educate farmers to improve animal welfare, therefore improve their production. And so this is just looking at animal welfare within their farms and also on transit. We also noted that none of the vets in the group focus on transportation or animal welfare connected to transportation. Hopefully we'll have some training on this. And then because it's a lot of work to monitor transport, daily or regular transport of animals, it was also suggested that it's good to have focal people to monitor groups that can help monitor animal welfare in certain regions. So training is highly needed. Yep, so that's just about it. I hope I did justice. If I didn't, my group, you can add if I missed out anything, or is that okay? All right. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, somebody was clearly paying attention during that working group session. Very good, excellent. I'll now invite the rapporteur of Daniela's group. Is that Daniela herself, or is it somebody else? Is it you? The pastor.
Thank you very much. I was volunteering to go in any case, so I guess I caught it somewhere. Good evening, colleagues. Well, I think for our group, firstly, I'd just say we did recognize the standards themselves as a good basis for best practices. And considering the land vis-a-vis the sea, the proposal that was had in revision of the standards to say this, we consider them as one, though they might be slight differences, but perhaps that's the best way to go. Then we noticed some challenges among the countries without specifying which country. The first were the lack of legislative framework. Some countries do have legislation, but it's outdated. So that's the first one. And although some countries do have guidelines, but there's lack of regulations to help enforce these guidelines. So that becomes a challenge in terms of enforcement. Then on the other hand, we noted that there is irregular implementation or non-enforcement of legislation that does exist in some instances. Then another challenge we noted was the lack of awareness with regards to animal welfare handling during transportation. So this is cutting across from whether the people responsible for transportation, the animal owners themselves, even at times the policemen perhaps on the road, they are not aware of what is required. And as a result, you find that some animals die during transportation, even across borders. That was noted in some of the countries. Even you would receive consignments with dead animals. And there's lack of cooperation between government agencies because of this lack of awareness. You want the policeman to help you, but he has no clue in terms of his role. So this becomes a challenge in implementing welfare. And the last challenge we noted was what has been noted by the previous group, that some animals are driven over a long distance on foot. So that is a challenge, whether for markets or seasonal grazing. and you find that then the animals would actually develop some complications as a result of this traveling for long distances on foot. Then the possible solutions we were suggesting was establishing relevant legal frameworks alongside regulations, guidelines, strategy documents to address these animal welfare concerns that were noted in our countries. Then the second one is raising awareness to all relevant stakeholders. Now these includes the owners of the cattle, the transporters, business people, the police, government agencies, etc. So in this awareness, we would like to disseminate the roles and responsibilities of each party in the implementation of the relevant frameworks that we would have in place and standards thereof that are proposed by governing bodies. Then there was also a suggestion of bilateral engagements between countries to align welfare issues during transportation when we were trading across countries. And there was another recommendation to engage regional community bodies in harmonizing transportation across borders, and also leveraging on the animal welfare strategy for Africa. There's an area of focus 4 which covers these aspects, so it's something we could leverage on as member states. We are expected to implement this strategy to some extent. Then lastly, with regards to the animals that are driven over a long distance, it is considering how best this can be done. At times, if it's seasonal grazing, you really can't, run away from it, but perhaps we must consider resting these animals. We must consider having watering points and whatsoever other measure that can be possible to ensure that these animals are well taken care of. So I think that's it from our group. Thank you.
Okay. Just a matter of semantics. I hear transhumance, I hear movement of cattle on foot and things like that. So just to be clear, so we're talking, in East Africa we say pastoralism. Okay, so it's movement of cattle across borders on foot. In West Africa they use the word transhumance, or nomadism. So it's just that we're clear on the, and this is of course a feature that is not common in Europe or the Americas or North America, but is clearly a dominating feature of our production systems. Okay, second group facilitated by Maria Correa. Is there a rapporteur for that group? Pearl?
Is it possible to project, because my boss noticed that he wants to see. My boss from Malawi.
Oh. Are you jumping ship, or is he jumping ship?
When you get older, you want to see things, not hear them.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure we can share it then, but it's okay. Now I need some help here. Why is it not appearing? Oh yeah, I have to put it on main screen, and then it should be appearing here. No.
It's duplicates.
Let me see whether we can duplicate. Not sure why it's blue actually. Because please go ahead. Just try to get her screen onto the main projector.
Good afternoon. This is Pearl from Botswana. I'll be presenting our discussions in Group B, led by Maria. So for our group, we mainly focused on transport by land. So we looked at our situation or our realities, and then we agreed that generally the perception we have of animals as Africa is where we don't recognize animals as sentient beings. For example, in our different traditions or different situations, animals are just animals. So you can use them however we want in a way that is really not in line with what we want to advocate for. We also noted that in addition to that, there is a lack of awareness at different levels, be it at the farming level or the production level, whether it's even with the competent authorities. There are different levels of understanding of animal welfare, or particularly in terms of transport, even within us as vets or paraprofessionals. We also noted that, okay, we may have awareness of what animal welfare in terms of transportation is, but what is our role? There's lack of role clarity and responsibilities. For example, as a veterinarian, I would know that I need to observe this. For example, a police officer, maybe if there's an accident or there's not an accident, sorry, if there's an issue of animal welfare contravention during transportation, they may not know what to do and how to address or handle that situation. Another colleague earlier mentioned that we are not prosecutors. So in these cases then, in terms of transportation then, there's also that lack of clarity and responsibilities. And in addition to that, we noted that we may have guidance or guidelines in some countries, and generally there is lack of guidelines in animal welfare in transportation. For example, design of the vehicle to use, the stocking densities, even the competencies of key players like the transporters or the handlers. So we concluded that we have lack of guidelines in those areas. Additionally, we noted that there is poor compliance to animal welfare requirements. Yes, we understand the standards that we are here for, but how do we even implement that in terms of transportation? This will be looking at farmers. They know that they're supposed to be transporting their farmers in a certain way, but there's even lack of enforcement of standards or the requirements in terms of transportation. And we talked of the law enforcement as well. And then we also noted that in our African setup, our poor road infrastructure, including even the distances that the animals will be traveling, and poor planning of the journeys. Because sometimes you'll have an animal or a transporter transporting animals for distances as far as about 500 to 800 kilometers, and there's no plan as to what would they do if there's an accident or if there's a need to stop and ensure that the animals are resting. And then there's lack of planning for emergencies during transportation. For example, if there is heavy rains or flooding or accidents, what would be done? So we also noted that we may have some legislation on animal welfare in transportation, but a lot of them in our African countries, they are outdated. We noted, this is an example that I gave for Botswana Cruelty to Animals Act of 1936. It's so old, and the penalties are as low as, for example, you'll have one being about $5 or about 500 Kenyan shillings for a contravention, which then it would maybe deter animal welfare contravention, but nowadays cruelty to animals, that is peanuts, really. And then we also noted that we have inadequate resources, particularly finances. I think my group mates wanted me to highlight finances to implement or to drive animal welfare efforts. So what do we recommend as a group? I think this one we all agree and have discussed that a multi-stakeholder approach to animal welfare in terms of transportation is key. This will be involving different groups of people, including the authorities, civil societies, the industry players, and the academics play a key role in these engagements. And we also noted that we want to create awareness, but for us to create awareness, we want to be able to identify our stakeholders so that when we design the messaging, it is specific to the people that we want to address or our audience. For example, a farmer in a rural area, if I come and stand in front of them and talk like this, they may not know what I'm saying, but maybe if I have visuals to show that this is good welfare practice and this is poor welfare practice. And in addition to that, because as a farmer, I want to benefit. I want to see what you're telling me, how it's going to benefit me. An example would be if we demonstrate that if we transport our animals poorly, maybe to a slaughter facility, when they arrive there, the cattle is bruised, chances are the bruising is going to be trimmed or condemned depending on the extension, and then the farmer will lose. And if you can demonstrate that in a level that they will understand and understand the losses they incur because of poor welfare during transportation, we can reach out to those audiences. And then advocacy, we want to engage communities. I think we agree that for our African setup, we want to start at the low level, which is our communities, particularly the smallholder farmers. So we want to engage community leaders and religious leaders like my friend from Eswatini. We know in Africa, and our religion is very important. Sometimes when a pastor is in front of me, I'm more inclined to listen to what they're saying, even if it's on animal welfare issues during transportation. We may want to explore those opportunities. And then also engage farmer associations to spread the messages to the members, particularly, like I said, the smallholder farmers. We have identified that for bigger farmers, it's easier to comply because most of them is of economic benefit to them. But because of the challenges in finances and resources, for smallholder farmers, it may be not so easy to comply. But if we engage associations or the existing committees within those communities, we also want to we propose that there is inclusion of animal welfare during transport at school curriculum. And in Ghana, my colleague from Ghana indicated that they are trying to promote living with animals as a topic at primary school. Instead of maybe saying animal welfare, but embedded into what is required at the level of understanding of a primary school student. And then we want to add animal welfare awareness to existing efforts. We do a lot of efforts in terms of engaging our farmers or engaging our stakeholders, such as commemorations of AMR or Rabies Day, or even when we are carrying out our surveillance activities. These are opportunities to engage or to include messaging on transportation. And then policies, guidelines, and legislation. I think that one has already been discussed. And with that, I thank you.
I should ask whether the next presenter is also going to project his own laptop? No? Paper? Okay. So the last group is the group that was facilitated by Leopoldo. Let me just make sure that we can see what you're doing. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, all. Yeah, with Group A, we started with identifying which animals normally are which species of animal are being transported mainly, which are bovine, caprine, ovine, avian, and porcine. And then those animals, then we identified again on the ground what mode of transport, mean of transport are normally used in those scenarios on those animals. So mostly is land in African countries, whereby they use trucks, pickups, bikes for pig, for porcine, trailers in some countries, and trekking, transwomen or pastoralists, with also some welfare considerations, especially when young ones are involved, and also the spread of diseases, which we think should also be considered in the code, in the standards. So we also notice that there are some pickups that are modified for animal transportations in some countries. we also noticed that with seas, with mean of using the sea or by air, only some countries, especially in Tanzania, where when there are festivals like Islamic festivals where some animals might be needed to be transported to eastern countries, eastern countries, and chicks mostly being transported overseas for long distances. The time frame for these transportations, either by sea, air, or land, can range up to 2 days or more, without stopping, or with some minor stopping here and there, only for permit for movement control compliances, like to check the permit, but not necessarily to look on the animal welfare perspective. The legal frameworks in some of these countries, most of these countries, they don't have legal frameworks. There's no legislation. Some are outdated. Some are in the process of being developed. So this is one area also that is a challenge in many African countries. Another thing is with inspections, when they are for land, like in trucks, the inspections are normally focusing on permits, on movement compliances. And if they are veterinary officials, they will focus on to see if the animal are deceased, they have a certain disease or so. But the people that are at those checkpoints or those movement control points, they are not considering the policies, the veterinary officials, they are not considering the welfare perspective of the animals. So the purpose of these animal movements, mostly some of them are going for slaughter, some are for breedings. Area of improvement that we thought should be considered, registration on transport. Many countries don't have registration that they can enforce on transport related issues of animals, either air or there is a standard of course for WOAH, but the country themselves, they don't have any registration. And then hence if there's no registration, there's no awareness, there's no basis for people. There's also lack of awareness on animal welfare and transportation issues. There's a need for capacity building on human resources and infrastructures. Like the trucks, they need to be modified in such a way that they are for transportation of animals, or the crates or the pickups and all that. And also the roading, where the animals are being roaded, they are off-roaded. There should be modification or infrastructure in place for such, to ensure that the animal welfare issues are taken into consideration. There must be a multidisciplinary coordination of all the players. Like my previous speakers have highlighted, the police, they need to be aware of animal welfare issues, because they are normally the ones that are checking this, controlling these checkpoints. The other NGOs, schools, kids need also to be updated at the small curriculum levels, at their level on issues pertaining to animal welfare and all that. And improve communication within this multidisciplinary NGOs and other associations. So finally, the challenge is broadly is legislations that are outdated, infrastructures, awareness not taking place, lack of coordination, capacitations in infrastructure and human resources, and then logistics, the transport, the method of transport that are being used, especially for pigs, and pig being used on just put on a bike or in a taxi, even pets sometimes just put in whatever is available on a bike and all that. So thank you very much.
thank you very much indeed. I hear a lot of commonalities, despite, of course, the geographical differences between the regions. Leo, would you like to engage or manage the discussion going forward? Maybe things you picked up that require a bit of discussion on interpretation or otherwise. Of course, there are a lot of things that governments should be doing, that communities should be doing, and that we should be doing, but maybe.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Hello, 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 hello. Yes. Thanks for the rapporteurs. It's good to hear them and know that they are willing to share the work of the colleagues in the groups. As Bas mentioned, there's a lot of common things that were discussed, and not only I think in this region, but at global level. The lack of legislation, the possibilities to improve the infrastructure, this relation with the other agencies or other authorities like the police, and how also to develop that relation, how to share that kind of common work on controlling when there's the possibility to control. There is no, if there's lack of legislation, it's something difficult. Then, well, some of those things escape a little bit of the remit of the WOAH, but I will take one that I think that, and it was something not new for me, because also it's practices in my country when we talk about tracking or transhumancy or nomadism. I think that it's something that probably the other group will include in the discussion. Just to be clear from my side, because we discussed with the colleagues from Namibia and Angola that in their case, and also it's probably the case from my region between, for example, Chile and Argentina. Animals goes alone, not with a whole community, to look for better pastures. Then it's something that is quite temporarily, and is more or less kind of repetitive activity during summer. Then I think that there is other ways of this kind of movement of animals, where the animals are not necessarily go and come back in the same way, because, for example, in Chile it's easy. The producers, the livestock holders, they ask for a permit. The veterinary service go to the mountains. Then they wait them when they come back. They control it, because obviously the sanitary situation is different in the other side of the border. Then I don't know if we are talking just about that, or is other kind of production system that make animals to travel continuously during the life, with also with the family, and etc. And that's a question, but also please free to add other aspects that for the four presentations you also think that is something that we are missing, that could be interesting to discuss in the group. Here I have one question.
Thank you, Leo. I think we have to be clear on this issue, because I think the document what we develop, it should be inclusive. If it's specific only for a kind of some, well-developed countries, it will be difficult again. Whatever we are working on this, it has an implication on one health, public health, economic importance, and so on. So, having said this, in Africa we do have tracking on hoof of animals because of different reasons. It might be for pasture, it might be for climate, due to climate change. It might be also unfulfilled infrastructure, because when we talk about moving animals by vehicle, we are talking about roads, vehicles, and so on. If those things are not there, we are not talking about the issue will be closed there. So, but animals are moving. Not only in Africa, even I'm just have question. In Europe, is that possible to gallop a horse the whole from France to Belgium or Netherlands? Is that okay? So kind of that. So we have to also, when we say accommodative, it should also think that if the infrastructure is not available, so what has to be done, because we are talking about the animal. So for example, I will give you, in Ethiopia we do have this guideline, like for animals which are trekking on hoof, like for sheep and goat, if my memory serves me well, it's like 8 kilometers. After that they should have take a rest for 1 hour or 2 hours, 3 hours with food, I mean feed and water. So kind of such kinds of things it should be considered, unless otherwise if we are talking about air transport, vehicle, I mean sheep and train and car, truck or something, it only, it works only for those who have those kinds of facilities. But most of the animals, they are not on such luxury places. Thank you.
Thanks. As I understood, you mentioned 8 kilometers? Yeah. That is in under some regulation, or it's a common practice?
Kind of guideline. It's not yet binding, but it's advising.
Okay, thanks. Any other comment on this issue? You have the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. I want to emphasize on some of the production systems, we have, particularly in my own country, the Gambia. We have a free range kind of production system for cattle, sheep and goats, and even pigs. So in that production kind of a system, it's like in the evening, the animals will be put together at one place. Do you understand? In the morning, after getting the milk from the female animals, they allow the animals to go to feed on their own. In the wet season, they will herd them, going for grazing. Normally there are grazing lands. Sometimes you call them the rangelands. So these animals, they have track routes where the animals will go into the rangelands for grazing. So in the evening, they come back. That is during the rainy season. In the dry season, when everywhere is dry, no farming is taking place. So in the morning, they leave the animals to go and fend for themselves freely anywhere. Do you understand? So in the evening, the herder will go to, case the animals to come back to tie them at one place. Do you understand?
Yep.
So then we have the semi-intensive kind of a system, whereas the animals will be kept, for some time, in the evening, When they come back, they'll give them supplementary feeding, from other feed resources, farm residues and so on. So those who are practicing intensive kind of system normally is for the draft kind of animals, horses, donkeys, and some cattle they use for farming purpose or for transport purpose. Those animals, they will keep them at backyard, and they'll provide some kind of feed for them. Let's say groundnut hay and crop residues during the dry season. So in the wet season, they use them for farming activities. Those in the urban areas who are doing purely intensive kind of system for commercial purpose, let's say dairy and so on, so those one, at least they keep the animals, they provide the feed, all around. They have money to buy, for poultry production, something like that. So these are the kind of systems we have, yeah.
Trying to establish how to go forward on the
now, I'm coming. Yeah. The issue for transport here is, because in the dry season, in communities where they don't have pasture available, they migrate. They migrate to other regions where pasture is available. Let's say in the swampy areas. So in the process of this kind of migration, because it's like in the dry season they will go there, when the rainy season is in, they come back. So in that process of transportation, there are welfare issues. Also, during in my community, we have this weekly marketing, within communities. So you see, farmers from different communities will bring their animals in this weekly market to sell them. So there too, there are transport issues. Others will trek these animals. Some will use horse carts, some will use bicycles, some will use vehicles. But the vehicles did not, standards are not there.
I think that was, we were discussing on this kind of transport, that in some point the group think about it, but so far the other group didn't went further, and I think that is something that probably the group is going to discuss again, and then it will be from your side to also to comment on whatever recommendation comes from the discussion. Then for sure it's something that it will be enrich the discussion of the other group. Then already I think that I expressed what I think that is something that is new. I already mentioned that lack of legislation or the lack of enforcement, the legislation awareness or the awareness in general, and also the infrastructure aspect that I repeating myself. It's part of the challenges or could be the opportunity. There is some also mentions about the need to update regulation that is existing. It is also something that need to be done as we do it in WOAH, reviewing the transport chapter. Is there any other aspect that you need to highlight apart from those ones that we have mentioned here and they were mentioned by our rapporteurs? There is something new, please, that we haven't discussed it yet.
During transportation, you find that we have like if it's for trade, we have the traders, we have the animal handlers, and some of them don't know how to handle the animals. So to me, one recommendation is the training of these handlers of how to handle the different species of animals during transport.
Yeah, thanks for sure. I think that the other group is considering that topic as important as also in other operation like slaughter. That training of the personnel it's a key aspect for the success of any operation. Thanks for that. Any other aspect that you would like to highlight? Can you pass the microphone to the colleague there?
Okay, maybe it's quite different from the transport. Is that possible?
We are on the transport.
Thank you. I'm thinking to link this concern for animal transportation with food safety, because I believe that in every country there are some institutions responsible to check the meat quality. So maybe we can see how to involve them. Thank you.
I didn't get it quite well.
I'm saying in some countries, for instance in my country, there is an institution responsible to check the meat quality or food safety. So I'm thinking to link them with our concern that, I hope you get it. Thank you.
If I understood correct, there is a lot of data that can be get from the slaughterhouse that are related not necessarily to the slaughter process. We talk about the effect on transport on the animals and on the carcasses, and I think that it's a valid point, and it's maybe even I don't remember, but it's mentioned in the introductory part of the revision of the chapter that all those problems have also a cumulative effect on the animal, which can be found also in the slaughterhouse, in the abattoirs. But it's a good point. I think from Namibia wanted to say something.
Yes, I thought of something in relation to animal transport, especially for veterinary care. So in Africa, we have a situation sometimes where the veterinary service is far away, and the animal probably is broken, the leg is broken, or is pregnant. It requires, and in the way of transporting these animals, the welfare of that animal get compromised. So also in pregnant animals, some of them, I think they said this is called transit tetany or something, where if you transport these female, especially female animals, or even female luminants, when they reach their destination, they won't stand up anymore. So I don't know if this is a welfare issue that need to be looked at.
No, that's a good point, and I think that all the legislation and standard around the world, one aspect that it's key for the success of the transport is the fit for transport of those animals. Then if you don't transport an animal that can complete the transport, for sure it's going to be a catastrophe. Mozambique.
Thank you very much. I don't know, but in my country, we use the train to transport cattle and goats without any condition of animal welfare.
Yeah, good point. It's something that probably the other group is going to reflect about it. Yeah, even if I think in my country, train completely disappear because trucks and buses are the one that are transporting animals and people. There's no train. It's a pity, but because in the past. When I was a kid, I like it a lot to travel by train, and I even now I living in France, I enjoy it because it's important. But it's something that we take note, and Maria for sure it's noting, and we are going to look at it. Any other aspect? I think there's a hand there.
Thank you for that. As we put these measures in place, I think we need to do continuous monitoring so that we document the gains. Where are we moving? Are we moving forward, or are we stagnated at whichever point that we are? So monitoring is important, and maybe identification and traceability should also play an important role, so that during transport, in terms of maybe disasters or food safety issues, we should be able to identify where is the origin of this animal, where did it originate from, or the possible trade routes that it went through. Thank you.
Good point, thank you. Yes, it's true that there's some cross-reference to other chapters that also could be done in the revision, and the one on identification and traceability could be one of them, apart of others. Well, I think that we can stay here. I think that we collect a lot of good and useful information for the other group. I think Maria will be happy. And will give the opportunity to also to discuss those points in the next meeting. I think that's from all from my side. I thanks all the groups, and especially the rapporteurs, for the good job. Thank you very much.
This is an applause for yourself. You do realize that. Very well done. Thank you. I really like this afternoon session. I mean, we had a lot of presentations yesterday and even today. We're sick and tired of seeing Leopoldo's presentations, but now at least we had an opportunity to talk. No, this was great. And it allows us to get more feedback from the members on their views. So we are now at the end of day 2. Just a reminder, if you wish, it's not mandatory, but if you wish, you're all invited for dinner tonight at a restaurant which is very nearby. So we'll just walk there, and we can meet in the lobby of the hotel at 6:45. So that we go together. Whoever is late will have to make his or her own way, which is fine. I mean, because it's just ask for the handy restaurant in Westlands Mall, and every security officer will be able to direct you to the place. But if not, we'll see you in the lobby at 6:45. Otherwise, we reconvene here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for the last day of this training. Thank you very much, and again, applaud for yourself. And we say goodbye to whoever is still online. We'll see you tomorrow.